Good evening, everybody. I'm Julia Neiman on behalf of the Kern Fire Safe Council, and I want to welcome you to this very special webinar. Every month we invite experts to talk on a topic to assist you with wildlife fire preparedness, resiliency, and recovery. Our guest tonight is documentary filmmaker Christopher Allan Smith, who will share his personal experience in Paradise, California on the day of the campfire. Among Chris's credits, in addition to the Emmy-nominated A High and Awful Price, is as an associate producer on Oscar-winning director Ron Howard's National Geographic Rebuilding Paradise, a documentary about the first year in Paradise after the campfire, and several Emmy award-winning anti-drunk driving public service films. Chris is currently working to recover from the aftermath and always on the lookout for ways to spread the lessons he and his fellow Paradise Ridge citizens learned from the campfire. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Christopher Allan Smith. Hi, Chris. Welcome, and thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm always honored to tell the story of my, fellow friends and neighbors on the Paradise Ridge, and to talk to anybody that is ready to hear the message of disaster preparedness. It's been an interesting ride that I never could have anticipated or imagined kind of before everything happened on November 8th, 2018. And I just want to thank everybody for coming and, giving us your time to hear the message that and hear the lessons that my fellow neighbors and myself learned. So correct me if I'm wrong, but we were wanting to play a 5-minute version of the film that's on your site now, called A High and Awful Price. It's a film I made in association with the first responders and some of the citizens of the Paradise Ridge in the year after the campfire, to kind of tell my story, but through my story, tell the story of everyone that responded and what it all meant to everybody. So let me get that part set up. And this is a 5-minute preview version. There's a 58-minute version that I believe is on the Kern County Fire Safe Council website or YouTube page.
Yeah, I'll give that link at the end.
Exactly. Okay, here, let me play this and get this rolling.
This was Paradise. It was our home until November 8th, 2018.
Typically, your average wildland fire was spread somewhere between about 1.4 to 1.9 miles per hour. The campfire was unfortunately the perfect storm.
And it became a blizzard of embers that caused new fires out in front of the main body of the fire, that those fires then developed rapidly. And it went from fire started in a remote area of Polga to a community of Concow in an hour to a community of Paradise in another half an hour. So in an hour and a half time, 7.5 miles.
It destroyed everything. People were basically left with what they had on their back or what they were able to grab quickly.
This is the story of the campfire. Those who escaped it, those who fought it, and those who lived its lessons at a high and awful price.
And we go by a model of, you risk a lot to save a lot. And so we're trying to explain to them, today's the day we risk a lot.
When you're talking thousands of houses, thousands of businesses, it's truly like a bomb went off.
The disaster displaced over 52,000 people from Concow, Magilla, Paradise, Yankee Hill, and other parts of the Paradise Ridge, and it killed 85 of our friends and neighbors. The number of structures destroyed was almost 1,000 more than in the Great Chicago Fire. By the time it was extinguished 15 days later, 153,000 acres had burned. That's 75% of New York City. These are the lessons that saved our lives.
You never want to evacuate a town with a population density of Paradise all at once. That's not the desired outcome. However, Mother Nature dictates to firefighters and to law enforcement when we have to make a decision, and Mother Nature's hand played out rapidly that day.
Respect reality. Trust that the dangers and threats around you, which may seem unreal, are serious and worth reacting to sooner rather than later. Denial is real and one of the leading impulses which derails good decision making. When you try to imagine the worst case in your area, imagine the worst you can, then make it 10 times bigger and 10 times faster.
It's easy to Monday morning quarterback. But I can tell you, I've been doing this for 36 years, and there's a lot of people around me that have had equal or more time, and none of us thought that would happen.
Let's say a disaster hits the Paradise Ridge. Then, let's assume every CAL FIRE engine and crew rush in to help, along with everyone from the Sheriff's Department. Let's add the 20 personnel from the Paradise Police, and a dozen ambulance crews, and every CHP officer in the county. Now, let's call out every fire engine in nearby Chico and Orville, and everyone in the Chico and Orville police departments. Being generous, that's 1,000 people. On the day of the campfire, over 52,000 people lived on the Paradise Ridge. Even with every single first responder in the county working at the top of their proficiency, there are tens of thousands who will need to self-evacuate without the aid of anyone.
What will come out of this, at least my hope, is that people will be inspired to take personal responsibility for their own safety, that they won't rely upon someone else to develop an evacuation or safety plan for them.
Oh, I think that our preparations missed the worst case scenario.
We have to think about what would happen if we had a Katrina, and it flooded the entire New Orleans area. What would happen if we had a fire and it didn't just glance across Paradise but burned through Paradise? Or an earthquake that destroyed the Los Angeles basin. Those are all things that we know are at risk, but it's hard to get your mind around that magnitude.
And I think everybody focuses on what they can do for their house and evacuation, but I think people need to mentally prepare for an instant. Not only what happened that day, but the effects after the fire. The fact that the town has been destroyed, everybody's lives have been turned upside down. As you know, you live there. Things aren't back to normal yet. I don't see them getting back to normal for a long time.
All right. I'm going to share a few PowerPoint slides now, just to kind of make things a little bit more clear. Thankfully, I should say this, and this feels strange to say, but so far, the campfire has been the most destructive in terms of property and people's homes and lives in California so far. It killed 85 of my friends and neighbors. Over 155,000 acres burned. On the day of the fire, 52,000 residents of Paradise, Concal, Magalia, and the surrounding communities evacuated from the Paradise Ridge. 95% of the homes in Paradise were destroyed. And the reason that I am doing this, the reason that I'm here talking today, because I'm not an expert necessarily in fire prevention or, wildland fires or that kind of thing. Why I'm here is to kind of talk citizen to citizen, to all of you who are thinking about your own plans and your own situations of where you live and how you live and what might face you in the future, to just try to get through what this feels like and what this has been like to live through on a personal, normal Joe everyday basis. We all have these, I think, I'll speak for myself, but let's see if you all agree with this. Before something like this happens to you, it feels like, yes, I see it on the news, I see these things happen, but in a sense, they don't really feel like it's going to happen to you. We all live in California and we know a gigantic earthquake is coming, but I think we all kind of have this idea that, well, it's going to be an earthquake, but it's not going to be the big one. It's not going to be the one that upends everyone's lives or, destroys or wrecks Los Angeles for a generation or something. But the fact of the matter is, any one of us might not be hit by an earthquake or a wildfire or a tornado or a hurricane or a pandemic or, a million other potential emergencies. But, there's some chance that one of those things is going to touch our lives in one way or another, and being prepared for it and kind of recognizing that fact goes a long way to helping us kind of break through the denial or the complacency or the, the comfort or the, we are very unbelievably blessed in this country to live in peace and tranquility and, have laws that more or less work. And so these world-changing events don't seem like they can happen to any one of us at any one time. And just the fact of the matter is, even in the most blessed country on earth, that's my opinion, these things can happen. So getting through that level of it can't really happen to me is mainly what I'm here to do today. One of the other things I wanted to say is my life, in a sense, was saved, and everybody's life was saved in Paradise and on the Paradise Ridge, kind of in slow motion in the 10 years before the campfire. The campfire happened November 8th, 2018. But in the summer of 2008, there was a fire that prompted a lot of community members to think, oh, what would happen if a fire came through Paradise? Because, because of our geography, because of the way the climate has been evolving over our lives and where we are with the drought and all that, the chances of careful thinkers realized that the chances of a fire coming through Paradise were very serious, and they started making plans and making, creating community organizations like fire safe councils and, evacuation zones and best practices for having things ready and whatever. And, this would come, they'd go to the schools and talk to the kids and talk to parents. And I would kind of hear this almost secondhand in a lot of ways. But I realized that, on a lot of this was, if you're going to evacuate, how would you do it? And my story is told in detail in the documentary. If we were going to evacuate, how would we do it? What would we take if we could only take one car full of stuff or one suitcase full of stuff from our home and everything else got left behind? What would we take? And we had done this kind of simple thinking over those 10 years and bit by bit by bit practicing and making these decisions. So in I'm hoping that everyone listening can remember the Karate Kid movie from the 1980s. There's a theme in that movie about a karate master teaching a student how to fight by doing mundane everyday tasks, you know, painting things, cleaning things, all that kind of stuff. And then when the moment comes to actually fight, he realizes that all the motions and all the muscle memory built up from those actions all kick into place, and he's almost trained as without even realizing he's been trained. And in a sense, for me, that's the way it was for all the community disaster planners in Butte County and on the Paradise Ridge. Is I'd been listening, taking note, not really changing my life, not really doing anything dramatic, but when the day came, I knew, you know, grab these certain things, pack these certain things in the car, and then get out. And that's what happened. And I was able to get out with my one son, who was the one that was there home that day. My younger son was in Chico, and my wife was on a business trip. And we were able to get out without having to drive through fire, without having to endure any of the dramatic things that most people saw on television, because people such as yourselves, people such as, you know, the Kern County Fire Safe Council and everybody, you know, on this call, the work that they had done in the community had gotten through to me without even realizing it. And it did make a significant life-saving difference. You know, there were 30,000 people that had to drive through tunnels of fire, and I was not one of them. One, because of a little bit of luck in where my house was and what my route was out, and two, because I was so ready that it took 15 minutes to load up our one car, literally getting out with the clothes on our back, but every important document, every important family heirloom photo, everything that meant the most to us came with us. And so I guess what I would say is, and even for the days after, one of the overriding thoughts that I had was, wow, this is really happening. This is really, you know, I've thought about this or imagined this or worried about this, but the sense of this thing that I never thought would have happened in a million years is actually happening and transforming my life and my community and my family. And this is not to say live in despair or live in stress or worry or, you know, freak out, or this is only to say it is possible to make sensible preparations for what you would do in the future if something like this presented itself to you. And those preparations will make a difference. You know, the situation I had with, you know, the insurance that we got, having our go bags and our go boxes ready. There's a, you know, for me, there was very little regret that lingered on after, you know, in terms of our preparation or whatever that we did, that lingered on after the fire. You know, there was an immense amount of pain, an immense amount of stress, an immense amount of et cetera, et cetera. But we were going through that with an entire community of brothers and sisters who were also going through it. So it made that part more bearable. Let me share a little bit more and see. I mean, if there are any questions, I hope people feel free to jump in at any point and ask any questions that you might have. one of the things that I wanted to say here is there was a snippet in the preview that talked about hold on for a moment. I guess BJ has raised his hand for a question.
Yeah, unmute yourself, BJ.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing all your, I can't imagine all the pain and sorrow going through all that. Your analogy of the Karate Kid is pretty accurate when it comes to muscle memory and not realizing you are preparing. I'm going to remember that analogy. That's great. I just want to jump real fast. One of the ladies said that they didn't plan for the worst case scenario. Just curious, as you would describe it, what was the worst case scenario without the obvious being stated?
Well, that's actually thank you because I was kind of synchronizing up with a thought that I just had a moment ago. This is a lot of times we'll have, and this has happened with the pandemic, and this has happened in like with September 11th, previous things, is people have this idea that, well, if smart disaster planners sit down and think about stuff, they'll figure it all out. And if they don't figure it out, they've somehow fallen down on the job or that kind of stuff. What they didn't realize specifically with the campfire is that it would move faster than any fire, any forest fire had ever moved. It was moving 10 times faster than the typical expected movement of wildland fires. So they didn't expect for it to go 12 miles in an hour and a half. They didn't expect it. They expected it to march through Paradise almost kind of like a line. Like if Paradise were ever to burn, it would go through kind of street by street from one side to the other and eventually kind of burn everything. But what happened was, because of some winds here in Paradise, called winds that come out of what's called the Jarbo Gap, embers went up into the sky, got pushed at extraordinary speed, kind of hundreds of feet in the air, and then rained down on Paradise, like 1,000 little matches. So in a sense, Paradise didn't go up street by street in a line that went from one side to the other. There were dozens and then hundreds of fires all over town, starting essentially at the same time. So it's kind of like the whole town went up at the same time. And because of that, there were, I think, 15 evacuation zones that had been set up. I was in zone 11. And the idea was, if something happens, the sheriff or whoever would say, okay, these zones evacuate, then these zones evacuate, then these zones evacuate, to keep the streets relatively clear and to make it possible to get emergency workers to where they needed to be without all the streets being jammed up. But when the whole city went up at the same time, essentially the same time, all of that kind of went out the window. But the thing is, if these, for example, weed in another town here in Northern California that has unfortunately been hit more, was hit a couple of years before the campfire and was also hit again this year. My understanding is that weed did have that kind of movement of fire from one side to the other, or the car fire in Redding that happened about 4 months before the campfire, that kind of went from the west to the east in this kind of line fashion. So there's kind of a deficit of imagination, that because emergency workers don't have an infinite amount of time to think of an infinite amount of disasters that could happen, they're always going to not quite hit with their preparations the disaster that actually confronts us. Do you guys have any other questions or anything, or Does anyone?
Hi, Chris.
Yes.
This is Peggy.
Hey, Peggy.
Could you talk about the importance of when you see smoke in the air, when you are feeling like you might be in danger, as the importance of evacuating early so that there isn't this traffic jam, because
Yeah.
I'm sure people wait and don't leave at all.
Yes.
And
Actually,
thank you.
that is actually kind of a common question, and thank you for asking that. The one of the things that I heard from first responders that deal with this every day is that usually if it occurs to you, hey, maybe I should evacuate, you're already running late. So my thought has always been, and I think this was, you know, one of the things I had heard in the preparations, and one of the things that worked out on that day is that, you know, if you're going to evacuate, almost take it like a snow day. We don't really have those here a lot in California, but almost take it like a snow day of, well, I'm, you know, because I work from home, my thought was, well, you know, I don't have to worry about this. I'll just drive down the hill to Chico, you know, load up the car, drive down the hill to Chico, which I had done 5 or 6 times over the years before the campfire. And every time we went down, had lunch, had breakfast, maybe stayed overnight at a hotel. And then within a couple of days, the evacuation orders were lifted, and then we went home. So the idea is, don't worry about evacuating. Don't stress back and forth on whatever. Just if you think about it, if it crosses your mind, if you hear something's going on, go. There's no harm, no foul in leaving. And, you know, you just pick up your work, you pick up your whatever you were supposed to do the next day and get going. That's one of the, I don't want to say the nice things about the pandemic, but that is one of the things about the pandemic that I think people are a lot more cognizant now of life away from work, life, you know, there's an urgency to life. There's an urgency to what you want to do with your time on this earth that, you know, don't worry about being self-conscious about if you need to take some time, if you need to go somewhere, if you need to, you know, err on the side of caution. That's the way, you know, that's the way it is. And if anybody can't understand that, that's, you know, make that their problem. So, so yeah, I would say if you see smoke, if you're worried about it, you know, don't over worry about it. But if, you know, if you see smoke and you smell smoke, pay attention to the local news and the local the Paradise town of Paradise had a really good kind of web page to go to that would give us information on what's going on and what fire dangers there are, or how, you know, any of that kind of stuff. So we were able to kind of work that out pretty easily, know whether or not you need to evacuate or not. One of the things I would say is look to the Paradise or the Butte County Fire Safe Council, because they have a lot of information on creating evacuation zones and evacuation areas for situations just like this. And setting that up, I think would be a great thing to do. Peggy.
Yeah, Peggy.
That's me again.
Hey.
Many of our mountain communities in Kern County have very limited ingress and egress capabilities. Some of our communities have one road going in, and it will run through the community, but it's one road. And I understand that Paradise had 5 roads going out of it, so that helped with evacuation. Can you talk about how important it is. And this goes again about leaving early, because I just want to stress to the communities up here in the Kern River, the Tehachapi areas, and the Pine Mountain communities areas, because we have such limited access, that's another reason why you have to get on the road and get out.
Yeah.
So could you talk about?
Yeah, I would definitely say don't be shy about getting on the road and getting out. Don't be shy about grabbing things and going. That was one of the nice things, you know, the media attention that Paradise got was immensely helpful and immensely meaningful to us in terms of what it allowed our community members to do and recover in certain ways. We were unusually lucky in the way that the media told our story. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of them just kind of grabbed the simple facts and whatever, and they made it sound like it was just one way in, one way out, and that's not the case. 10 years, one of the things that saved a lot of lives, and I would direct this to the governmental agencies in Kern County, is one of the things that made a huge difference is after the 2008 fire, there was a huge backup of people going down essentially 3 roads off the mountain down into the Chico area. And it took 9 hours, 10 hours for some people to get from, you know, certain parts of the ridge down to safety. Luckily, nothing happened that year, but everyone, I think, realized that if a fire had roared through, it would have been unbelievably tragic. So what they did was they built a road going north, going the other direction off the ridge from Paradise up through Magalia, up through Sterling City and further up, with the idea that if there was another fire, that road would help people get out the other direction. And on that day, about 20,000 people took that route out. So that decision to build that road, expand it, get the funds from California, gathered with local funds, made a meaningful direct difference. So I would say if there's anything like, if it's possible to build another route out for these various communities, have your local officials seriously look at that, seriously look at what they can do to create more ability to get out, because it does make all the difference. So having multiple routes and getting out early, you know, yeah, I can't stress that enough. Is if you think you need to go, there's no harm, no foul, no shame in getting up and going. So
Probably the best advice actually is to have people just go. When you know there's something going on, just leave. Don't be part of the problem.
right.
Right? Get out early.
And I think there's a kind of, I don't know, not shyness or self-consciousness or something of like, oh, if there's, you know, I see smoke, so I'm going to evacuate. Well, you know, who cares? It makes no difference. It's, you know, there's no reason. Well, especially I'm hoping after the campfire, you have a completely reasonable explanation for why you're erring on the side of caution. You know, maybe I'm kind of joking when I say it like this, but you know, use me. I'll vouch for you. If you feel like you got to go and anybody makes fun of you or says you're, you know, being overly cautious or overly whatever, just send them my way and I'll talk some sense into them. And, you know, I'll tell them why people need to err on the side of going. And there's, you know, it literally does make a difference.
Chris, I just wanted to say thank you. And when I went back and watched the video, the whole video that's on YouTube, it's the lessons that you put in there that struck me. You know, not just the disaster can be 10 times greater than you think
Right.
it is, but it's like reality. You know, it's hard. People don't want to accept that the reality is it's happening to them. And there is a lot of denial, like you said. And I think that's the hardest thing that we have to overcome when we're out in the community, because people just don't think this is going to happen to them, or they're prepared enough. But then you said this thing, I love the thing that you said, like prepare and then prepare again, prepare for that, prepare, you know, have a backup plan for your backup plan. You know, like you were prepared and you got out.
Right.
How have you recovered from this?
It's been challenging. It's one thing, you know, Paradise, and this is what I would say to every town that isn't a position like Paradise. It's one thing for a neighborhood to be wrecked by a tornado or flooded, or, you know, a couple neighborhoods burned down. When you have the heart of the town, you know, the schools and most of the businesses and many of the churches, and when you have a lot of things like that destroyed, it kind of hits this tipping point where it's kind of like your whole past. It's, you know, Paradise is still there. People still live there, but the town that we all knew before is gone and it's never coming back. And dealing with that, when, you know, we do have a community of people here that have all gone through this, and it's nice to have them here, but there are thousands of people that have scattered all around the country dealing with this on their own. And it's just very challenging. It's you know, it's been pretty difficult on my family. I won't go too much into detail on that, you know, because I'll let my ex-wife and you know, sons speak for themselves. But you know, it can be very difficult to deal with this. But the idea for preparations, you know, but that's kind of like a metaphysical, how do each one of us deal with the vicissitudes of being a human on earth, is, you know, that's one thing. The lessons for this are, how do you survive that one day so you can have these problems to worry about later, you know? And that's what these lessons are for, is to how to get you to survive big disasters so you can consider these things and worry about these things later. Ed, I think Ed Reith is here. I think you have a question.
Hello, Chris.
Hey, buddy. How's it going?
Good, brother. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
I'm one day at a time, man. One day at a time.
I hear it. Exactly.
Actually,
Ed,
I just wanted to add to your comment in backing up to the evacuation route. We're referencing Highway 191, I'm assuming. And that development and how that really changed the mindset for a lot of people, especially in the north end of Paradise and through Gallia and Inskip and all those mountain neighborhoods to the north there, neighboring. Because prior to that time, people, especially in 2008, when people really didn't know the expanse or the direction that fire was going to take, and it was just merely a dirt road, 1.5 lanes, and until that they got the federal funding to do that, it did really change the mindset of people and living in the community and how they would prepare and which way to go, kind of thing. So this is important for us to understand, because in our mountain communities here, especially in Pine Mountain Club proper, where we do only have 2 ways in and 2 ways out, we've already decided that we have to work on the assumption that one route is going to be cut off. So it would be a forced contraflow like they did in Paradise, where everybody's going out one direction.
Yeah.
And without having an alternative escape route to get out of here, it's going to create havoc for just about any community. So I'm glad you touched on that. And I just kind of wanted to add to that for some of our listeners who aren't familiar with the area and how much of an improvement that made on the disaster planning and evacuation planning in itself. So.
Yeah, it made all the difference. And Ed was the first one to bring me into contact with everyone here. He lived in Paradise for many years and then left us before the campfire, thank God, to come down and live in Kern County. And he's referring to Highway 191, that was the route that was built out. And he texted me here in the private chat to kind of let me know, hey, it was Highway 191. And I'll be honest, I didn't recognize the number because I always thought of it as, oh, that's the Skyway, that's the way out and whatever. Officially it is 191. But I just thought of it as kind of the main route in town, and that went out through Magalia and then up that route. So thank you, Ed. It was Highway 191 that was built, and that makes and to get back to being a little serious here for a second. That highway literally saved lives that day, because there were everyone in Magalia, everyone north of Northern Paradise, a lot of people in Northern Paradise all would have had to drive through curtains of flame, all would have had to drive through downed live power lines, all would have had to drive through areas, and there would have been people that didn't make it through. But there's 20 to 25,000 people did not have to drive through fire because of Highway 191. So, we can never really know how many people were saved or whatever, but you're never going to be able to convince me that didn't save anybody, because 20,000 people driving through curtains of flame, the odds are not on your side. But because there was that route out, because the people who were in charge had thought things through and done the work to get the funds and all that to make this route out, that made all the difference. So
Try something.
Yeah. Yes.
So I was just wondering, we had heard rumors afterwards about looting in Paradise, and we wondered if you knew anything about that, if you could talk about that and what happened.
My understanding is there was some, but not a lot. A lot of it was kind of on the day before people really understood what was happening. I really hate to say it, but after, there were people caught after, but in Paradise and large parts of Magalia, there was nothing left. There was nothing left to loot. It is something to think about. It is something to worry about, but it is not a reason. It's not a reason to stay needlessly. There's always those people that say, oh, well, I'm just going to stay. And, you can't make me leave and I'm going to do it, which is fine. I mean, I understand the principle. I understand it's kind of I don't want to say uniquely American, but charmingly American defiance of authority, of like, you can't tell me what to do. I can do what I want. I have freedom and whatever. And that's all true. And that's all great. But you can't argue with the wall of fire. You can't argue with rising floodwaters. And there were instances where sheriffs, I've talked to sheriff's deputies and Sheriff Honey here, where they had told people, you got to leave. And they say, we're not leaving. We're going to stay here and protect our, you know, protect our home, protect our whatever. And they were never heard from again. You know, and one of the things that I learned is that when you really think about what you need in your life, when you really think about what's important to you, I was able to get out everything that was irreplaceable that I treasured was able to go out in one carload. And everything that was left behind and destroyed, I don't miss any of it in a sense. You know, if as long as I was able to get my loved ones out safely, that's what you should focus on. The worries of looting, you know, that's the thing, is if there's a national disaster and people come in and clear your house out, that's what insurance is for. That's right. That's what law enforcement is for. That's what, you know, that's what all these things are for. And it seems it's one of those things, I think, that you think about before you face the disaster, but once you've faced it, it's like, what difference does it make if floodwaters or a fire takes everything from your home, or if some looters get in there and take some stuff from your home that you can replace with insurance? You know, it doesn't make, you know, I think one of the things that's interesting is we get so used to the daily frustrations in our lives and the daily setbacks and the daily stresses and the daily whatever, that when something like this happens, all those things that consume so much time and worry and stress and whatever just gets wiped away. You know, it does have other detrimental effects, and it does, you know, I struggle with, you know, stress and quick temper and stuff, you know, things. So there's definitely some emotions down deep in me that were created by all this that I deal with. But a lot of times I don't stress about any of that kind of stuff anymore, because if it happens, it happens. You know, as long as you know, a lot of the stuff that we took out are like family photos and all that kind of stuff, and looters not going to take that kind of stuff anyway. If they want to,
that's right.
If they want to grab my TV and run through a flaming street with my TV, I mean, good luck to them. And my understanding is that there was not an unusual amount of looting. It is something that people hear about, and it is something that people worry about, but the actual personal impact, I think, is pretty small, which is one of the things that I wanted to hit. One of the things that I really noticed, here, let me try to share this, is after the fire, the amount of misinformation and just BS ricocheting around on Facebook and kind of all social media, but it was Facebook where I really noticed it, was just unbelievable. So just when it comes to dealing with things and dealing with the aftermath, you're going to hear a lot of stuff from a lot of emotional, hurt, pissed off, confused, misinformed people. There was actually an additional video that's on the Rocket Spots, or that's going to be on the Rocket Spots YouTube channel, and is on my website, 3 Days in Paradise, that talks about just information, rumors, and how to deal with that in the aftermath. Because I think we've seen a lot of things, especially in the last couple of years, just the way that people communicate about facts is very difficult to discern. One of the things that I was shocked about after the fire is how many of my friends and neighbors that I had trusted what they had said, and I had listened to what they had said, they were still good, thoughtful, honest people, but they would read one comment on Facebook and then go start telling people, oh, this is what's going on and this is what's happening. And then you would ask them, well, where did you get that? Oh, well, I saw it on Facebook. And then you'd say, okay, show me on Facebook. Because I would always assumed that it was like some story or some firsthand account that they were saying. And no, it was just some tossed off posting, tossed off comment from somebody that may or may not have even lived in Paradise. So they were kind of creating a ton of stress and a ton of worry in their circle of friends by just repeating some dumb comment on Facebook. The other thing I found that was actually quite shocking is you hear about, you know, after September 11th, you hear about different conspiracies of what happened, or after the JFK assassination or whatever. After any big event, especially now, you hear these big conspiracy theories. And I was always under the impression that they kind of bubbled up slowly, kind of weeks or months or years after an event happens. But there were people that day spreading on Facebook, on social media, spreading around fake photos, fake information, fake reports that I knew personally were BS. You know, I would see photos that were supposedly were coming from Paradise that I knew for a fact. You know, we had one, for, you know, on examples, we had one KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken, and they had some, I think there was some photo of some fake Kentucky Fried Chicken that didn't look like Paradise, didn't look like anything. So I knew it was BS. And it just the rapidity that people will put out BS, take the opportunity to put out BS while people are in the middle of a tragedy is just, I found shocking. So, you know, when it comes to something like this, the idea is, you know, take in a lot of stuff, but be very careful with what you put out. Be very careful that what you are saying, you know, to be true in some sort of personal way, or you verified it, or gotten it from somebody that you know is solid and know is reasonable and know is not a, you know, a dramatic gossip or something. You know, we all have those people in our lives that they love to tell stories and kind of amp things up and maybe say things in such a way that's not necessarily true, but boy, it makes a great story. You know, imagine that cohort of people in your lives dealing with the emotions, dealing with the stress, dealing with the sadness, dealing with the drama of something like this. Is those instincts that they have to make the, you know, ice cream social sound dramatic in their retelling. They're going to do it 10 times or 100 times in this instance. So be careful with what you hear, or, you know, be careful with what you believe, and be careful with what you put out in the world, because you don't want to be part of the problem that's you're, you know, creating a megaphone for a misinformed person or a ill intended person. You know, I think we saw it earlier today, and I believe that will be edited out of the final version. So this part will be a mystery, but you'll see that there are people on the internet that want to cause heartache wherever they can, and they will use your disaster to do it. And, you know, years later, you will get friends or neighbors or family asking you, you know, it's funny. There's a congresswoman whose name I will not repeat, who talked about space lasers, and space lasers starting fires in California. And what not a lot of people outside of Butte County realize is that was the campfire that she was referring to. So, you know, there are people that will say things just to be dramatic, and you'll have to deal with it, and people will still talk about it years after the fact. And you do not want to be amplifying their misinformation.
Yeah, no, that's really true. And a lot of these people just want attention.
Yeah, they do.
They just want attention, and they'll do anything to get it, and they have no clue how hurtful that can be, and they have no boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Chris, this has been one of the fastest hours I've ever spent.
Holy moly, right, me too.
And yeah, and I just really want to thank you for being here and sharing this, and you know, to see how you're coping with this, and that it's still there for you. You can hear it in your voice, and when you speak, I feel the emotion, and I really appreciate that you're here sharing that rawness with us, because that's really what touches us and makes us think twice about a situation like this. And I know here, you know, this is a high fire danger, and we haven't had a fire in over 120 years, maybe longer. I mean, in recorded history, there has not been a fire up here at the top of this mountain where we live. So we're, you know, everybody's like counting the days. We feel like we're on borrowed time, and that's why we have the Kern Fire Safe Council has this big thrust to help people prepare. We want people to understand how serious this really is, and how even the smallest amount of preparation for each thing that you do, you have a higher level of confidence, I think. And one of the things that I got from watching the longer version of your film was seeing the tragic events, but yet on the other hand, feeling the hope that learning the lessons that you outline will really help you survive that and get through it in a much better way. So I really appreciate that you've done this and taken the time. And I want to say to everybody here, if you have questions that you didn't have a chance to ask, or you wake up tomorrow and you think of a question that you'd like to put to Chris, please, I'll leave it on our Facebook page under the event post, and I will make sure that it gets to Chris. And we're on Facebook at kernfiresafe.org. And also our website is kernfiresafe.org. There's a space there where you can leave your questions. You can also make comments, make suggestions. If you have an idea for a webinar or something you would like to hear, please feel free to leave that suggestion for us. Yeah, so we're totally open. The Kern Fire Safe Council is a community organization with the goal to educate Kern County residents on how to prepare for, survive, and rebuild after a wildfire. You know, being a resilient community is something that we strive for, because we really want to be able to bounce back quickly. And that's the idea of presenting all these webinars and giving you all this information. And we have a lot of resources on our website to help, and your feedback is always welcome. So I am Julia Neiman on behalf of Kern Fire Safe Council, reminding you to keep your space defensible and your go bag packed.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll see you on the next webinar.
Thank you. Thank you.